Welcome back to Deep Thoughts, ladies and gentlemen. So, I like to pace the videos when I put them out. I like to pace the emotional sort of effect that it might have on you. And so, sometimes we have like more deep, darker subject matter, and other times we have more lighthearted stuff. So this will be one of the more lighthearted ones. And this is something I wrote down on my phone a couple of weeks ago. It was called the mindset, or the ancient mindsets. And what it has to do with is sort of this bizarre reconstruction of history that we are trying to do with places like Egypt. Now, one of the huge focuses of this episode will be Egypt. So if you dig Egypt stuff, Egyptology in general, this will be in the realm of that. But because I consider Egyptology some of the dogma on top of real history, it's actually not going to be validating much of what is claimed by modern Egyptologists. Gee, I hope I don't get demonetized. Oops, already done. But when I got done with that ancient architecture series, the two pieces I did based on Brian Forstall's documentary he did, which is his research for about 7.5 hours. Only a small portion of it was about Egypt, but it was so profound, it just really shook up my mind. Then I got on Uncharted X. I started watching his stuff, which is just a beautiful channel. Very detailed, his channel. And Brian's stuff is super detailed too. But they go at it from different directions, which is fantastic. So by looking at both of their things, you get a pretty well-rounded reintroduction of the mysteries that need to be solved. But one of the things that Brian brought to my attention, I should say, was that when you finally realize how to separate dynastic and pre-dynastic time, and for those of you who are new to this whole thing, that would be those who really built the pyramids, those who really built the temples, those who built Saqqara, Valley of the Kings, Valley of the Queens. You start to run into the differences in construction techniques. You start to realize that many of the hieroglyphs that are etched onto things that are priceless heirlooms of pre-dynastic civilization, if you believe in aliens, it's even more heresy for human beings to scar and graffiti these amazing works of art. But once you start to see the differences easily, and Brian is probably your best bet. Just look at Brian Forstall, and it's like probably a 6-hour, 50-minute special he did. Not everything he does is polished, just he has some really, really raw footage he shares with us, but that's fine. He's just like, hey, if you see something I don't see, I'm going to give it to you before I even fully analyze what I filmed. So some of his stuff is less entertaining, but he's full disclosed. It's really cool. Love the guy. But he pointed out quite clearly in his personal journeys all over Egypt and all over Africa that the pre-dynastic people didn't seem to have any written language written on anything. Now, there are some areas where the hieroglyph relief is so deep and so precise, it does look like perhaps maybe that was the original language. But we're going to get into Marshall McLuhan's take on the invention of phonetic languages, which is what hieroglyphs are. And that there was a whole era before that that was living in a more iconic history and thus a more now-related brain set. But it totally appears that this pre-dynastic era, which has very limited expressions of art, their expression of art so far would be probably seen in two realms. One, statues. Seems to be the most profound, amazing, just amazing capability that they had that no one in Egypt has now. It's just funny. You're supposed to be a society that was at step A, and then you go to step B and step C, or you go from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and you just keep increasing your level of technology. The reason why the Egyptians didn't build any of that stuff is because nothing in Egypt is remotely sophisticated. It's not. It is the lower inversion of all the things that the rest of the world can do better than they can. I love them, but that's the truth. If you could build a pyramid where they say, 2800 BC, well, man, you should have Panther City somewhere, right? As I've said before. But now we know that these structures were most likely built anywhere from 30,000 years to 50,000 years to more, and were simply discovered by the latest inhabitants of the area. It doesn't take anything away from beautiful Egyptian people and their great culture and beautiful language. I mean, it doesn't. Just, you don't get to claim that you built the pyramids simply because that's where you live and that's where they are. The other form of art was in everything that they did. The statues actually have such three-dimensional art that as a child, you won't see it until someone shows you and explains it to you. But the fact that pi, the circle, the sphere, it's all over all of their designs. The symmetry between the left side of the face and the right side of the face, left side of the being and the right side of the being, is perfect. So perfect that modern day stoneworkers are like, yeah, we really can't do that today. I mean, we could, but it would cost you a tremendous amount of money and take the absolute most advanced technology we have today, and then we'd have to create more technology on top of that to smooth it all out and make it perfect. Unless they could liquefy rock and pour it into a mold. But that would be cheating. Or would it? There are several statues that are all busted up in the desert, and they're burned really badly. Brian seems to believe it's a cataclysmic, cosmic wave based on a bunch of hokey cosmology. He's not a cosmologist, so that for him blows his mind, and that's what he's hanging on to. Whatever. The more important thing is what Brian has figured out, which is that on the side of a statue that seems to have a burn mark, it seems to also fall in the direction of the side, just like a force hit it and knocked it down in that direction. That's probably one of the greatest things Brian's put together. Statues that are made of quartz, boiled on the top. It takes 1,000 degrees Celsius to boil quartz like that. Plasma energy is a great source of that type of energy. He's leaning on a book a guy wrote about a black hole in the center of the galaxy. Oh my gosh. Boy, why don't you just put Santa Claus writing a bolt of plasma from Neverland, What I think has happened is that all the pyramids on Earth, if they're built properly, are very conductive objects built on an aqua ravine with a plateau between them. And if you build 200 of these things all over the area, and they're all siphoning out plasma from the core of Earth, as Tesla proved in Colorado Springs, eventually you could siphon out way too much, and these things are going to start arcing across the desert, or the land, I should say. It doesn't matter if it's a desert or not, but desert would be very helpful. And you would have what he believes he's uncovered. And I just saw a recent update by him that really explains what he was saying. He said he thought he had found pyramids that looked like they exploded from the inside. They blew out. And there's nothing about the Great Pyramid and the other two that really spell that out. But the one he showed was just utterly decimated. But it also has sort of the kind of crater of the remaining stones with all these other stones scattered out around it. He has some evidence to suggest that's exactly what took place. When you fill one of those things with inexhaustible plasma, you could have this stuff leaking out for days, weeks, if not years, until all these things are blown apart to the point they can't do the siphon anymore because they've been destroyed as an object to do the siphon. Meaning, if you put a rubber hose into your buddy's gas tank and you're sucking on it and you finally get it to come out, when the hose starts disintegrating, well, then the siphon ends. Same theory. So a lot of us have been surrounded by beautiful art our whole life, simply because you either create it or you choose to surround yourself with it. And so I think a lot of what I'm about to say will ring true with the bell inside your soul when it comes to what art really can be and how fundamental and easy it can be. Think about a smooth, finished pyramid with white limestone. How blindingly amazing that would be to crest a little hill in the desert and see that thing. Oh my God. And they think now that the second one was red and the third one was black. Even if it weren't. 3 amazing, beautiful, bright pyramids. Oh Lord, you would just think, and they're built out of pie, 4 sides all put together, 4 corners put together to build a pyramid based on pie. I mean, it's just like, whoa. And there's chambers inside those things, and they have this functional purpose. Built on a plateau that's supposed to be taller than the pyramid. The pyramid's 450 feet tall, roughly. Catacombs of water inside this plateau, all electrified because it's built on a natural water formation called aqua ravine, letting all this internal plasma come up through there. I mean, it's just phenomenal, right? So, if you ever see movies like Blade Runner, Tron, they're worlds that are gorgeous. They're built gorgeous. And it's sort of what I think the pre-dynastic era, prior to anything in modern age, I think that's what they were doing. So we're going to try to climb into the ancient mindset. I got some tricks up my sleeve to get your mind to think a little bit differently here. One of the areas that was mind-blowing in his episode was the black boxes of Saqqara. These black boxes that are 100 tons finished, they seem to be about, I'd say about 7-foot squares, sort of what I gather from the way they stood next to them and looked at them. And of course, some low vibration megalithic era, scratched these horrible hieroglyphs into them. It's the ugliest hieroglyphs you will find in Egypt, period. I've seen thousands of these things. It's the ugliest you've ever seen. Just butchered into the side of the box. Quite frankly, taking that guy from the 90s who was head of the Cairo Egyptology, I wouldn't be surprised if that guy himself did it. I don't know when these boxes were discovered. Basalt is supposed to come from Turkey, a cool 500 miles away, in a time when they're dragging them over, boats? I mean, how do you get it there? How do you get it there, man? And over in Lebanon, they have big, giant red granite pillars that are 50, 60 feet tall, and those come from Egypt. It's like, so it seems like there was a little bit of an exchange going on. But there are these black boxes. They're square. And then these black boxes that look more like your traditional sarcophagi. And the one thing that Brian Forstall came up with was, if you go over there and they show you a couple boxes, and you say, well, which one's the oldest? The more precise, perfect one, the bigger one, the mitered one, is the oldest. And the big round, definitely built by man, pounding it rock with rock, well, that's the more modern one. Hence my assertion, it had nothing to do with building the pyramids, okay? But something occurred to me, and I'm going to share it with you. For those of you who went and saw the documentary that he put together, or you've ever seen these boxes, these more sarcophagi kind of boxes, you'll love this. So we could sit and labor on and on about how the boxes are made. It is absolutely proven now they had circular saws. They both had the more circular drills that were digging out the boring holes, and they also had circular saws that were simply cutting stone. But these basalt boxes are polished, okay? Polished. The parameridian stone that they've got, I believe, in Cairo, which is the tippy top stone. They have a basalt one of those, and it's polished, okay? Just ask anybody what it's like to polish a hard number 9 rock. 7 to 9. I guess actually technically it's 7 to 8, excuse me. You have to use 9 to 10 to cut a 7 to 8, right? Always has to be a higher grade rock to cut a lower grade rock, because otherwise it melts. All right. But then let's just say, we're them. We're the pre-dynastic people. In terms of technique and how to build these things, doesn't matter. You got it all figured out. But we don't have a written language that we're using on the outside of the boxes, and so you don't know anything about us, but they exist. All right. Let's say we have a project put together here. We're going to build 10 of these boxes. Why? Well, let's think about this for 1 second because it's important. We're trying to climb into the mindset of the ancient pre-dynastic era. All righty. What do you do with boxes? Why do you build boxes? Oh, I know. You put stuff in them. That's what you do. Oh my gosh, we are making progress here. We're going to have this figured out in no time. All right. Well, what kind of stuff do you put in boxes? Especially big, gigantic, 50 to 100 ton boxes, of which we are going to spend a tremendous amount of time designing and making perfect. We're going to seal them up so they're just as hermetically sealed as anything this world has ever sealed up. And then some 50,000 years later, Neanderthals are going to take crowbars and destroy them to open them. Whoa. Whatever. When you see the damage to these boxes, it's really just heartbreaking that anyone could approach these boxes and go, hey, I know how to get it open. Give me that bar. But you put in boxes special things, right? Especially nice boxes. Some of you may have a nice box at home. Put nice Cuban cigars in there or something. But I'm going to guess that there's two things you would put in a box about that time. You would put treasure or someone who's passed away so they could live in there. Unless the boxes themselves are not to contain anything. The boxes are actually performing a function of some sort. Perhaps even just a giant capacitor, a giant resistor, a giant diode, something. Maybe. Not likely, but we got to keep our options open, right? So, we're going to build 10 of these things. We're going to put stuff in. You're going to take 4. I'm going to take the other 4, and some other dude's going to handle the other 2. Okay. So we divide up all of our stuff, and you got some treasure in this one, you got a body in the other, you got some other trinkets in the other ones. All right. And then we seal them up. However we do this, we seal them up. My gosh, they are really sealed, aren't they? Man, high five, poof. A couple of years goes by, and, we want to do one of two things, or maybe both. One, we'd like to pay respects to someone that's in one of those boxes. 2, if we want to get something out of the box that we put in the box. I was thinking about, I put my uncle's watch in there, because he always loved that watch. But, I just started thinking about it. He's not using it anymore. So, we're in there. I'm going to get the watch back. I'll have it put it back in after I die. Whatever. And so now we're in the chamber that these boxes are stored. Apparently they've been moved. I'm not sure exactly where they were originally found, but they're in a pretty cool place. And we're looking at them. All right. Which one's Uncle Bob and which one is Uncle Bob's treasure box? I don't know. They all look the same. Yeah. We're pretty smart, aren't we? Yeah, we are, aren't we? Got those boxes all the way from Turkey, 500 miles away. That was a hell of a thing. And we also engineered these things. And, those pyramids we built a couple of days ago, man, those things are wicked. Wicked awesome. You know what we forgot to do? What? Come up with a way to write something down? Oh, yeah. So the super sophisticated society that builds these amazing things didn't need to write anything on the outside as to what's on the inside. Oh. Well, I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt that they had deprecated any need to label the outside. Doesn't that affect the whole equation? I think it does. It's sort of the equivalent in my mind of walking up to a computer today, and it's a great computer, good resolution, it runs really, really fast, and we're like, damn, I wonder what's inside this thing. I don't know, give me that screwdriver. Open the side up, nothing's inside. Nothing. It just runs because it just is, right? What else is over there? Because we're trying to assess their view of written language, which doesn't seem to have any that's dated back to that time. And again, there are some hieroglyphs that are about they're etched into a stone, obelisks and other things that are super precise and super deep. I mean, I haven't been there to put my finger in it to measure it, but it looks like some of these reliefs are like, or I should say etchings, they're like half an inch to an inch deep. I mean, big hieroglyphs. Okay, all right, well, seems strange that that would exist there, but nothing would exist on some of these amazing creations. The chambers found in Saqqara don't have any writings on the wall at all. Brian Forstall put together that they had actually put plaster of some sort on the wall and then painted on the plaster as to not disturb the original chamber. Brilliant. They knew they had found something divine, something special. Unless they didn't want to break it. I'm assuming that whoever etched in the boxes later on were not those same people. I want to give you a little archetypal analogy to the way I see horrible etchings on the side of beautifully carved jackals, boxes, amazing things. There's a movie back in the 80s done by Sony Pictures, Sony MGM. That was called Dragon Slayer. Those of you who've seen it know it is an epic moment in time for special effects, for in-camera special effects. And this kid is on a journey to kill this dragon. It's burning up places, it's threatening the neighborhood. There's this wizard that he follows who's like this weird comical Merlin who's just kind of in and out of the movie. At the end, the kid kills the dragon. Hope this doesn't spoil anything for you, because it really isn't going to spoil much for you. It's the other part of the story that's the great part. And you know he's going to kill the dragon. Come on now. But he has this epic battle with this dragon, and this dragon is the most phenomenal thing ever. And after he kills it, and it hits the ground, and it's all messed up. I think some of it's on fire even. The king, who's this old bastard, it comes up. He can barely walk. He can barely stand. He certainly can't hold a sword by himself. He comes up with his little brown-nosing squire or whatever this guy was, and he stands on the dragon. He can barely hold up his sword, even though it's stuck in there for him. And somebody reads the decree that the king killed the dragon. Let it be known for the annals of time the king slayed the dragon. He usurped the kid's thing. He stole the kid's victory. Kid just wanted the girl in the end anyway. It seems like that's what's going on in that area. This so confuses things as we're trying to figure out the mindset of ancient pre-dynastic Egypt. But they built all these statues. And no one would contest that statues are a work of art. I forget exactly what the name of the Ramsey location is, but it's like Ramsey's Plaza or something where they have 28 80-ton statues of just, dudes sitting straight up. And they're all identical. They're huge, tall, and they're all identical. Not only are they identical between each other, and many of them are damaged a little bit, but we can use Photoshop to just overlay them on top of each other to figure out that it's the same statue, even if part of the face is missing. But when you have many of them that are perfect, and you do the feathering, you go into Photoshop, you take one half and feather it over on the other half, it's a symmetrical statue. Unbelievable. Do you ever do anything that takes a lot of energy unless you really feel like you need to? Now, one could cite slavery, but there's no indication that these were slaves. That's just a nice way to make them seem like savages. And remember, in history, every time a nation wants to conquer another nation, or if they're already conquered and they happen to have scientific prowess that is above yours, thus making your people feel like they're lesser humans to other humans, and they call them savages. They deprecate everything. They lie. They revise history. if they're not able just to go down and destroy all the evidence that this actually ever happened in the first place. We know that the Christians went down and defaced a ton of places down there, and they blamed it on previous pharaohs too. They said that Pharaoh B got rid of Pharaoh A by scratching at his face. Maybe that took place. Seems strange. Seems strange because stone, what can you do with stone? Well, if you really built the place, one, you could just get out your machines and shave a layer off, getting rid of the other dude's thing, and then etch yourself into the new one. Or create a relief or whatever. Nah, it's all blamed on local pissing match between someone who's dead and someone who's alive. But now let's go into language for 1 second. Because how could these amazing structures be built and no one ever documented how they were built? I was all over Egypt, hieroglyphs from Egyptology, and the only one I remember is a painting that has a dude sitting on a sleigh on top of a rock, pile of rocks or rock, and they're throwing water in front of the sleigh. And that's the way they, were saying that they moved these stones over the desert. Well, that'd make any one of the pyramids take thousands of years to make. Let's remember too, the Great Pyramid is built out of 2.3 to 2.5 million stones. I'm not quite sure. Right. And one of the things that Ryan reminded us of is if you could calculate how fast it takes to make a stone and place a stone, and you multiply that times the amount of stones, you get a general estimation of how many years it took. Now you could multitask. You could have one group of people digging the stones out of the quarry, and one group of people transporting them, and one group of people putting them in place all at the same time in assembly line. However, the Great Pyramid's built different than the other pyramids. Its stones slant inward, with the veneer on the outside being level. It's an illusion. The Great Pyramid is actually suffering structural integrity issues internally because it is built different. And the other two were considered crappy knockoffs, which is why they have less chambers inside, is the theory. So whoever's building the Great Pyramid, it's great, isn't it? You can't just run up there and throw stones in. You have to have the geniuses who invented the schematics for this thing present to monitor the placement of all the stones, because you get one off and it's screwed up. And we know that you can try to take a piece of paper and put it between a stone, and you can't. They're perfectly fitted to each other. You have a 50-foot long stone that has less than a 500th of an inch variation. Why don't you just get a buck knife out and try to carve a piece of soap to that level of accuracy? You'll find it very difficult. And you'll think you have escaped with a precision cut, and as soon as you put it in a microscope, you'll find way over a 500th of an inch deviation. So just basic observation suggests to me that this thing had to be built carefully. At least the first one, and it's the biggest one. And no one documented how this was done. So there's a couple theories we might throw out there. One of the strangest theories is they didn't feel the need to document anything. That seems a little odd. That means oral transmission of all these scientific methods like pi are being communicated strictly verbally. No one is writing anything down ever, or whatever they're writing it down on perishes instantaneously in the overall spectrum of human timetables, but the pyramids themselves will be here until the earth explodes. And that's a fact, baby. Those are contradicting theories of observation. Did they build them with the idea they wanted them to be a secret of how they built them, so they never did document it? Like Kubrick getting rid of his unused footage for every movie he ever filmed. Remember, Clockwork Orange's original cut was over 4 hours? Oh my God, how would you like to see that movie, right? He had it all burned. I dearly hope the original footage is still in his mansion in England. So a group of people who had mastered all mathematics that Greece would love you to believe they invented. They mastered it. They didn't just master it, they used it, and you could see it. Isn't that amazing? What blows my mind is that, just a little bit of a digression there, is all the other civilizations that found the pyramids never attempted to build one. It was just immediately daunting, immediately a mystery. So even though Greece is supposedly, Pythagoras' homie, figured out a bunch of stuff, they didn't go, oh, I get it. This times that equals that, and now you got a pyramid. That's great. Let's build one. Okay, great. Wait, bring the diamond bit drills over and the circular. What's that? Oh, that's right. We haven't invented that yet. Oh. Someday we'll get one done. Oh, yeah. Maybe Tom Hanks will help him build one. But now Marshall McLuhan did a lot of thinking about the effect of phonic linear writing and the human mind, in contrast to a more iconic now thinking. For those of you who've seen every single episode, you will have a remnant of this in the back of your mind from probably over 450 episodes ago. But what he realized was that as man began to use a phonetical way of writing, what is a phonetic? And what does it require? Well, it's this bunch of syllables and emphases that construct words that we speak, breaking it down into the various sounds that we have, consonants and vowels. And that ended up percolating the human brain and advancing it to the point that time itself became an element of man's consciousness. If you want to say supercalifragilisticexpialidocious, it takes a little bit of time, doesn't it? And most of us don't necessarily spell that in our brain. We definitely know that we're going to be going on a roller coaster trying to say that word. Was it anti-disestablishmentarianism? Takes a little while, right? So once man's mind relies on this methodology of speaking, of communicating, then a lot of things begin to occur inside the human mind. Constructs and mechanisms to conceive of things over time. So war, for instance, one of his examples was that war between an iconic civilization and another iconic civilization was pretty much run out on the battlefield, punch each other in the face, throw some rocks, beat each over the head, and whoever seems to be tougher, we'll call that person the winner. Just like the apes in 2001: A Space Odyssey. Then you introduce this linear thinking technique. And what ends up happening? As George Bush Jr. would lovingly say, strategery starts to show up. You get pincer maneuvers. You get the art of war. You think things through. You premeditate. You plan. And then you execute. Take that all the way up to, say, Napoleon, who was a calculus major and a major artillery general who literally blasted his way to the top. He could set up a bunch of artillery, calculate the explosive and the projectile and the distance, and he could hit you right on the forehead, and thus made him incredibly victorious in battle. Anyone who sees the theater of war today, it is the utter epitome of simulation and an execution. So we go back to this time of pre-dynastic existence, and we're trying to see, do we have evidence of this linear thinking? Well, I think we might have a very low-hanging fruit mechanism to prove to ourselves that some form of this did exist. Now, at the same time, there's a bit of ludicrous association with language being the only way to get man to think like this, because man does get born a child, goes through various stages of growing up and dies. And so anyone who's alive in a human vessel, temporarily human, as their soul penetrates this reality, we know that they understand linear growth. When you have a child, you see it from an observational standpoint, not just in a prior experience standpoint. So it should be assumed that maybe at least subconsciously man was capable of thinking in this manner. Let's go back to Saqqara. We have these black 100-ton boxes, about 7 foot square, perfectly mitered inside and out, and they're dug out from the inside to be a box. These beautiful lids. And if they're 100 tons hollowed out, how much did they weigh when the majority of the weight was inside? I do believe that the 100-ton estimate is the current existing carved out box, but it may have been the whole thing. But let's just say it's the carved out weight, and that would mean this box would be potentially about 900 tons. There's a bunch of them. There's a bunch of square ones. There's a bunch that are rectangular, like sarcophagi, and then there's the statues in the Ramsey exhibit. There are, again, basalt jackals, multiple. We know that there's statues all over Egypt, big, gigantic ones. Some made with layered limestone that they didn't cut out, like the Sphinx. What I don't know personally is whether or not the Sphinx's layering was 100% intentional, which is what I think it is. It could have been, I guess, sedimentary rock there and someone carved it out, or they carved part of it and realized we need to stack up some more so we can do this again. The whole idea that the head kept getting smaller as the pharaohs kept putting their face on the front seems odd. They wouldn't just knock the head off and restack rock and do it again. I mean, even if you've got the neck really small, you just literally knock it away so much, then you restack it and recarve it and no one will know the difference. But if you're going to make 10 of something, the number I heard on the documentary he did was, I think, 28 of these sitting statues, these sitting figures, these male figures with a little smirk on their face. But I believe the South Egypt crown on them, as we refer to it, it may not be that at all. That takes planning, doesn't it? No matter how you're making these things, it takes planning. And if that's the case, that's pretty linear thinking, in my opinion. So why did they not litter these creations with timely messages on them? What's your point, man? I mean, imagine you realize that, well, let me back up. Excuse me. You are building things out of things. That's what man does. Homo sapiens sapien, the tool maker. So you build them out of mud. And then the water comes in, the mud melts away. Oh, crap. That was a good one. Jeez. And then you built them out of wood. And the termites come and, someone lights it on fire. Hey, what the hell do you do that for? Well, then you build something out of stone. And all of a sudden, your buddy, you can't do anything to it. It lasts forever. All right. Yeah, we got some. Your whole lifetime, it never got changed. Maybe you build small, they could break it. But other than that, it's pretty good. So someone realized that building things out of stone was a pretty bitchin' technique. All right. Well, when you look at the scale of which these things were built, it's pretty simple to say, if the pyramids are what we think they are, which is gigantic power stations, that is function. Just so happened they realized how to build it with form as well, meaning it's gorgeous by design. Isn't it beautiful that the primitives of the world are some of the most beautiful things, if not the most beautiful thing that we've ever created? That's why I love Sid Mead so much. Everything he made was based on a primitive shape. Even if you put all the gimbals on the outside, the spinner, the Tron light cycles, other than the V'ger entity in Star Trek, Sid was pretty fundamental in shape choices, which appeals to almost like a subconscious beauty that man can recognize. So someone had the conscious decision to say, we're going to build stuff to last potentially forever. Because what was man's conception of forever way back then? I mean, we have a hard time conceiving of forever right now. All right. So you're going to build these things so that you're always remembered. I don't know when this passage was actually written. Could have been in post-dynastic time frames. But they said, as long as your name is spoken, you live forever. It was one of the passages communicated about pharaoh belief. Okay, I think that's right? Many celebrities have been dead for ages. Many amazing people in history have been dead forever. Our relatives have passed, come and gone. But as long as we speak their name, they live. So they chose this paradigm of creation, this mechanism of creation, to stamp the earth with their very existence in an artistic fashion. Statues of people. Why not write something to communicate what that is? It's hard to believe, for me, that they had the sophistication to understand pi, so amazingly beautiful that all their statues exude pi. In so many dimensions and so many uses, from the cheekbones wrapping up to the edge of the lip, to the nose, to the forehead, all this crazy, beautiful symmetry. And they didn't have a written language? I guess strange things happen sometimes. But why did we write things down in the first place? Why do we do it? There's multiple reasons. If you do look at the hieroglyphs that we see today, they have all kinds of stories. They have parables like the prodigal son. They have the history of the various pharaohs that lived. We're not sure what year some of these folks lived. And they make it up and it sticks. So everybody wants an answer. Well, just give me an estimation is the way the first conversation goes, and then the next conversation is, oh, it was definitely at this time. It's the way it works. It's the way history's done. The hubris of man is the most evil effing thing to man understanding man. It infects and pollutes and distorts all history, all reality. And today, with big tech, they're trying to distort it in real time, forbidding you to see certain things, indoctrinating you with other things. It's heresy. It should be the biggest crime on this planet, is to mess with history. Because it is what retards humanity from ever evolving. Why didn't these folks embroider their amazing creations with logical steps like labeling boxes with whatever's inside them? If nothing else, the intellectual capacity that we have today, which I doubt is more sophisticated than pre-dynastic history, individuals, we ornate things, especially if they're tombs, we ornate them with memories and beauty. Isn't it interesting when you see a casket of an unknown person? A lot of times it's just a pine box. There's that crazy island in the Bay of New York. It's that island where they've buried over, like a couple million people, and it just says Hispanic male, white female. It just that they bury all these unknown people there. Anybody remember like Elvis's casket, or Aretha Franklin's casket? They're beautiful because people loved them, and there's no way you're putting them in the ground in some crappy pine box. It doesn't really matter in the end, but we do it because we're hurting and we want to pay respects, right? So these boxes are beyond gorgeous boxes. And if you have a mind that's perhaps more sophisticated than today, ornateness might simply be considered vain, overachieving. All we need to do is put people in these things. They're beautiful by design, and bury them. Because minimalism is what we have evolved to, not from. There's another consideration for writing things down. Talking about building the Great Pyramid. So one might speculate that there's one dude who knows how to build these things at any one point in time, and that one dude is always on set, making sure every rock's put in place, every statue's being carved the proper way. But that puts a lot of liability on that guy not getting hit by a rock on his head, falling down the steps or something. I would think that a sophisticated society would avoid such liability. So one's going to have to educate a group of people on how to do anything. Quarry the stone, transfer the stone, and stack it up. Building lots of stuff, guys. I believe the count of bent pyramids is something in the 120s. They say they're discovering new ones all the time. But there's temples / maybe hospitals, if that one dude's correct. And so the other thing, too, is you write it down as a mechanism to transfer the information forward in time. Because oral repetition can be really laborious, can't it? Now I gotta explain this crap all over again because I got a new batch of students. Go over to that wall over there where I wrote it all down and then come back to me and I'll solve any outstanding issues you might have about geometry. So the other one is the conception of a civilization's own recognition of its mortality. Now, it's safe to assume, or I should say outrageous to assume, that a prospering utopian culture may never envision their end. This is always going to be. And the more iconic society that's not relying on phonetic language, well, then it seems pretty plausible that you're in the now. Now is now, and now is going to be forever. All right. But now, let's say that something great happens, and you want to remember the story, because it's a great story. It's maybe perhaps a significant moment in the history of your civilization. And maybe it's not bad news ever. It's all good news. The day we discovered the plasmas at the center of the earth, we don't know what this stuff is, but boy, when it comes out, it really lights up the place. I want to write that down. Maybe you have a person who's really amazing. I want to write that down too. There's all kinds of invisible intellectual forces that should exert themselves on a modern society to forge out of the society the need to track time. Thus, a written language. And yet the boxes have no writing on them. It's a puzzling thing, right? So let's go to the next gear of thought that is something I've only recently realized. Let's say you have enough wisdom to create a pyramid. You have enough wisdom to generate just an amazing likeness of a human being or an animal in carved form, an extremely hard stone. Because when you have a block that goes into the pyramid and it's, say, a level 7 hardness of rock, it is definitely an amazing thought to think that someone was able to bore holes in those things, they were able to cut them perfectly over 50 feet in less than 500th of an inch deviation. That's pretty damn amazing. But you use a jekyll made of the same sort of hardness from a rock that's really far away. You got that talent? All right. Hats off to you, man. Now, where's their Panther City? You mean to tell me that that sort of innovation wouldn't have come into the home? We have all of these milestones in man's history where, the Romans had perfected the aqueduct and the arch, and Greece had built the Parthenon, on and on down the line. Even in today's time frame, the tallest building in Dubai, in Singapore, we got the new Freedom Tower. These are amazing accomplishments. And then we also have sophistication in the home. Everything's digital now. We have the internet anywhere we go on a telephone. We bring that to ourselves because we've conquered these these more fundamental constructs that then can yield smaller luxuries. Now, maybe what I'm about to say is actually present but buried. And there are all kinds of projects where they're digging things up, Just beautiful temple-looking structures, definitely dwelling-looking structures where people existed. So some of this exists. But what is a little confusing to me is that, it's unfortunate we'll never know the population of that area. We just won't. We found a lot of tombs and things like that. And, was it the 30,000 Greek Egyptian tombs they found in those caverns underneath back in the late 90s? That's pretty cool, but that's pretty modern. It's pretty post-dynastic findings. So the people that are building these amazing things, I'm going to assume, would invest in building a city with the same technology. And you might say, well, I get it. It's probably just for the pharaoh. Maybe this stuff is so expensive, only the pharaoh would be the one to invest in his or her own dwelling. Where are those? We have some beautiful temples and homes that we think are built for various people by various people, and those probably were. But I don't know that Brian Forstall has shown us anything that looks pre-dynastic in those realms. But now, what is another way of having a very hubris outlook on your people, on your accomplishments? You're the dude in charge, head pharaoh, head whatever you want to call yourself at the time. You don't know that they ever call themselves pharaohs in the pre-dynastic time. There's probably a leader, right? Someone's got to greenlight things, right? Because some people just aren't even born to green. I don't know. It seems like that. Do it. Okay. And then they all jump in, right? How many kings and queens have you known that want to look out over their empire and that is comprised of a city? Is comprised of palaces and centers where people can go, plazas, Great Walls of China, all these amazing accomplishments, those amazing structures in Ethiopia. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Maybe the people aren't allowed into a lot of the locations because they're too amazing. There's supposed to be only noble people in there, whatever. But where are these places? There are a lot of places there that match the sort of description I'm talking about, but nothing that really calls out to even say, 500,000 people. Here's what's interesting to me when they try to talk about the population of the world, and I believe my science is correct in saying London was one of the first places on Earth that actually recorded having a population of 1 million people all in one place. I think that's accurate. I apologize if it's not, and please correct me down below if that's not the case. Okay. It's a lot of people. 1 million people. 1 million people. Alrighty. That's 100 of my hometowns. No, sorry, 1,000, thousands. Yeah, it'd be better my hometown. All right. Well, when I saw the space shuttle land out in the California desert, there was 850,000 people watching the space shuttle land. 850,000 people. All right. Well, we know that Egypt has probably the majority of their structures underground. As Brian demonstrated in one of the tours, where he went 360 feet down, which was considered only 4 stories of construction. He was told there's another 10 below that. A mile is what, 5,280 feet? All right, so at 360 for 4 floors, we're talking about another potentially 1,000 feet down. So you're taking like a significant portion of a mile down to the ground. The majority is still not satisfied yet, but you're talking about a quarter mile, third of a mile down to the ground. Wow, right? And what he shows you in his photographs is how they dug these mitered, some aren't as beautiful as others, but some of these caverns that you climb down into, and by the way, at the 4th floor, down, there was a basalt floor, and they don't know how big the box was. I mean, it was like a basalt floor with like about 1.5 feet of water in it. For some reason, he said he didn't understand. He said that the water being down there and being so pure was an anomaly. And maybe pure is the only thing that would jostle my mind as well. But water being down there, rains or whatever, without being exposed to the sun, lack of evaporation, it kind of makes sense to me. But a big basalt box that might be easily 1,000 tons down there. I mean, oh my gosh, it could be 20,000 tons. You never know. All right. I think that suggesting that Egypt as a nation would have come up with 500,000 to 1 million people spread out over a nation, not just all in one place, is not a large assumption in terms of just estimating a population that could create 125 bit pyramids, the Great Pyramids, the Plateau, all these underground catacombs, all of these temples and whatever. I mean, it seems like, millions and millions of people live there. And forgive me if someone has given an estimate. I haven't heard it. But it's funny because I was actually going to be working on a project for a buddy of mine. He never followed through. Where I was going to build a fake futuristic city of Egyptian architecture. And so I did this gigantic scarab beetle was at the center of the city. I got that done, and then he just fizzled out. So I'm just thinking that as a proud nation who has seemingly completely grasped mathematics to accomplish any physically possible structure of both form and function, a giant city of absolute beauty. It's sort of like when Indiana Jones dug down into that little hole and he had to put the staff in, put the crystal in, and then guide the light to wherever he was supposed to dig. And it had this miniaturization of a beautiful city. Something like that on a megalithic scale, all made from these megalithic structures with stones that are, we do have obelisks, and that's why Brian's there. He's tracking all this. We have obelisks that are, potentially 1,000 tons that didn't make it to their destination, but others that are perfectly upright and just how, So all these theories about using sand and a bunch of other stuff, but whatever, they did it. The world should have an eighth wonder of the world, which is some place to house all these people built from their mindset. And if you know of digs that are matching what I'm saying, and they're simply mostly under the sand, and they have a significant amount of acreage, because that's the big thing, right? I would imagine a city of that nature would be about 1,000 acres, based on the size of my uncle's ranch. Something like that. Don't know of anything like that. What I'm trying to assess in my own brain is a culture that doesn't need this super expressive art, that is satiated with function as a priority over any type of form, but also has the desire to create statuettes of individuals. And the statues that I've seen have always been sitting and being peaceful, even though we have paintings and reliefs of pharaohs, hunting in the afterlife. All right. So it's a peaceful culture too, when you really look at it. They don't have these things that you find in like Lord of the Rings, where you're going through a valley and they're, big, giant, formidable statues saying, don't come in here. If you do, we're in charge. Be on best behavior. Take your shoes off at the door, And then, of course, there's the cataclysmic moment that ends this particular culture. Brian Forstall has offered, for my opinion, the most profound new evidence to suggest that there was a firestorm over perhaps the surface of a lot of this construction that was in the form of great heat. Looking at statues boiled. They can't boil unless they're at 1,000 degrees Celsius. Whoa, we're going to get that kind of heat. Plasma energy is probably one of the most affordable, easy substances to blame. And again, he came up with the cosmic ray thing, like I mentioned before. I do think that my gut feeling says super strongly that in building all these pyramids and siphoning out of the ground all this electricity, there was some cataclysmic overflow of pulling the inside of the earth to the outside of the earth and causing a firestorm that would liquefy human beings super duper quickly, as well as a bunch of statues and potentially some pyramids that might have exploded, being perhaps the catalytic touch point where it started. And the rest of them just kept shorting out between each other. But what if this is really outrageous statement I'm going to make, and I realize this, but imagine you've created these limestone, very difficult to change the construction of because they weigh a lot, meaning you can't just turn them off. Once they're built, they're on. It's like building an on switch on your wall out of 2.5 million stones, and you can't quite turn it off until you pull the outer layer off, thus releasing the ether to pass through the stone instead of being directed down into the plateau. But even if you did that, maybe it's not doing it. But imagine a fog in your neighborhood. And when you stand in it, you're like, oh gosh, I can't see 20 feet. And you're driving in it, trying to get home, and you're like, oh my gosh, I couldn't see for 10 feet. Or I could only see 10 feet, Imagine that fog being built out of a cloud of plasma, singeing and burning and blowing up things. And you can't go outside, but there's no place to go inside because you haven't built the city to go inside of. You're trying to hide in caverns. You're trying to hide in any pocket that's not being electrified. But the whole thing starts to upheaval from the ground and just starts to vaporize these people. I've never contemplated such a thing before until Brian Forrestal. If you think about it, the biggest, sort of question about why people disappear from places is they migrate to other areas or they're conquered by a civilization that believes in complete genocide. Could be. But then you would sort of know more about them, maybe. Genghis Khan certainly ran across Eurasia, destroying before getting to know things, but there's different stories that say they try to integrate with societies that were willing to integrate. One of his fabled techniques was to send an emissary group in and say, if you join us, then we're just going to roll through and we'll take command of your city, but you'll live. We'll just work together and we'll crossbreed and all this other stuff. And a lot of cities, apparently, as the story is told, opted for that option. And others said, screw you, and then they would either win or lose. But because the world has evidence all around the globe of these megalithic societies, being the term we use to describe folks that could build things out of gigantic rocks, the information traveled all around the world. And I don't know that Machu Picchu has any written word that is associated with pre-dynastic time. Petra, don't know. Don't remember anything being spoken about their writings. Place in Lebanon. There's places supposedly in South Africa that have big temples. Turkey has huge temples. Others do have writings. But what's strange is we say that, some of the archaeologists are now saying, anthropologists are saying, well, these are probably, tribes that figured out how to travel over the ocean to get to the other continents, and then they changed things a little bit. They evolved a little bit. The Aztec pyramids and the Mayan pyramids and all that stuff, they changed it a little bit. Maybe even lost some of the formula, how to make it work perfectly. Maybe they forgot there needs to be a plateau underneath. They forgot that it has to be over an aqua ravine. You can use divining rods to find out an aqua ravine pretty intensely. It would be where the divining rod's just flying all over the place over a large space on the ground. And you're like, this whole place is electrified more than other places. Build a plateau here. But as much as these individuals who are trying to dig out our history, quite literally, have discovered things and figured out things. We are still at first grade now that we've wiped away the revisionistic history layers on top. Again, some areas are more pliable. The Incas are very upfront about saying, we didn't build that, we built this. That's awesome. I so appreciate their honesty. Other areas are more vested. And you understand why. We would too. I just don't think that a lot of things are built unless they have function. Especially big things. Stonehenge, its greatest mystery, other than being rebuilt in 1954 to 1956, it begs a lot of questions of, did you really put together this clump of stones, honing them, dragging them from really far away, just to make a place of worship? I mean, that would be an overwhelmingly, I want to say indoctrinated in a kind way, group of people that have so metabolized up their belief system that they've come up with a mathematical model of stones that somehow augment their ability to worship their gods. You know? And a lot of people, I think even archaeologists, anthropologists, they've gotten a lot into this summer solstice, winter solstice predictions because a lot of structures accurately predict such a thing. But it seems like man can get along quite well without that knowledge, right? I mean, it happens every year. Was it June 21st and December 21st, somewhere in there? All right, so what happens? We know it's summer, we know it's winter, whatever. Because every region of the world has a different sized winter, spring, summer, fall, and winter again, it doesn't seem like these dates really inform the people on how to, survive the elements better. As soon as a crop can grow, you grow it. As soon as it's done, you harvest it. You plant it again. Whoop-de-doo if your summer's a little short this year. Well, you just harvest whenever you can before the sign of scorpion comes to bite you if you don't load up your greenery. Remember, all the zodiac signs were all about the survival of mankind, not about some, summation of a random human being you meet on a bar someday. What sign are you? Stop sign, baby. I would definitely love to hear your thought process on this. My hope is that by talking about this subject matter for at least an hour, you're driving your car, you're working at home, whatever you're doing, something occurs to you, like shake something out of your brain that is the answer, or at least a better answer than the one I've provided. Better speculation. You ever have somebody with small hands and they're able to get in on something that's really detailed? Honey, could you help me out here? I got big hands, can't do this. And your wife, your girlfriend goes in there and your kid goes, ting, yeah, here you go, Dad. Oh, thank you so much. I'm a big clumsy guy. I can't do it. Can't type on my phone because I got hands that are too big. God damn it, BlackBerry for going out of business. That's you. You're a person that can get in there and potentially just get a little bit of that thread out of the sweater. And now you need a He-Man to yank it all the way. Or maybe you're the He-Man or He-Woman, and you can do it. This is how we can work together to incubate up possibilities. And it would be better, in my opinion, to come up with as many possibilities as possible in these brand new frontiers of history, such that as more data comes in, it's more conclusive because people like Brian go over there and do their homework. Then we look at our chart of possibilities that are theories based on the observable reality that we have been able to put together, and then the ideologic problem of coming up with potential realities. They give us the empirical knowledge. We look it up on our chart. Oh, man, it's looking more like this one right here. We still have our other ones there. This one here is really starting to sift up to the top. The cream, as it were. So that's what I'm trying to do for myself and for anyone else who's interested. You don't get a lot of these type of shows. I mean, in my opinion, I wish there were more out there. So we have our own university. This is what we're doing. So lay it on me in the comments. And if you haven't been to deepthoughtsradio.com, please go. All the video, audio, social media, all new remastered season 1. There's a store. I left a season 5 shirt out there until I create my artwork for season 6. And there's a couple ways to support the channel financially. There's PayPal for one-time deposits. So people have got those reoccurring deposits, by the way. Thank you so much. You're in the credits. And then, of course, PayPal, which is set up to do exactly that sort of thing. So for all of you who give up a little bit of cash, know that you are actually responsible for the intro. You're making things happen. The rest of you enjoy that greatly. And we're teamwork, right? As LL Cool J told me, teamwork makes the dream work. Take care of yourself and someone else, and I'll see you in the next Deep Thoughts. Over now.